He was just a single dad trying to make things right after his son accidentally broke a priceless antique at a local shop. Never expecting the quiet woman behind the counter was a secret billionaire who had just moved to town to escape her own broken life. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from the late afternoon sun slanted through the dusty windows of Liam's workshop, casting long shadows that made the sawdust on the floor look like drifts of gold? He ran a calloused hand over the smooth grain of the rocking chair he was restoring, the wood warm and alive beneath his touch. It was honest work, the kind that left you tired but full, the kind that didn't come with spreadsheets or stock options, just the quiet satisfaction of making something broken whole again. From the corner of the workshop, a small voice piped up bright, with the untamed energy only a 7-year-old could possess. "Dad, can we go now?" Liam looked over at his son Noah, who was perched on a stack of reclaimed lumber, his worn sneakers dangling inches above the floor. He had a smudge of wood stain on his cheek, and his hair was a wild tangle of brown curls that defied every attempt at being tamed. "Almost done, kiddo," Liam said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his tired eyes. "Just need to finish this final coat." But his heart wasn't in it. Not today. The letter had arrived that morning, tucked into their rusty mailbox. A crisp white envelope that felt heavier than it should have. It was a final notice from the bank, a polite but firm reminder that the workshop his grandfather had built, his father had run, and he was now struggling to keep afloat, was on the verge of becoming a memory. He hadn't told Noah he wouldn't. He'd spent the last 3 years since his wife passed, building a world for his son made of stability and warmth, a world where grown-up worries weren't allowed to cross the threshold. Noah deserved that. He deserved a childhood that wasn't defined by overdue bills and the quiet ache of what they'd lost. Noah hopped off the woodpile, his sneakers thudding softly on the floorboards. "But you promised we'd go to Mr. Henderson's to pick up that old clock he was saving for us." Liam sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, I did. Okay, you win. Give me 5 minutes to clean up, and we'll go." He watched as Noah's face lit up. A supernova of a smile that could power a small city, and for a moment, the weight in his chest eased just a little. That smile was worth every sleepless night, every splinter, every worry that gnawed at him in the dark as they stepped out into the crisp autumn air. Liam pulled his worn flannel jacket tighter around his shoulders. The wind carried the scent of wood smoke and damp leaves, the quiet perfume of their small town nestled in the valley. It was a good place to raise a kid safe, familiar, a world away from the noise and hustle he'd left behind years ago, but safety didn't pay the bills, and familiarity didn't fix a broken business model. He ruffled Noah's hair as they climbed into his old pickup truck, the engine turning over with a familiar groan of protest. "Ready to go treasure hunting?" he asked Noah, beamed always as they drove through the town square past the familiar storefronts and the clock tower that had stood for 100 years. Liam felt a familiar pang of love for this place, and a sharper pang of fear for what he might lose. He glanced over at his son, who was chattering away about a book he'd read at school, and Liam made a silent promise. He didn't know how, but he would find a way to keep this life, their life, intact. He just had to. The antique shop was a treasure trove of forgotten things, a place where history whispered from every corner. It smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and time itself. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams that sliced through the tall front windows, illuminating stacks of leather-bound books, tarnished silver, and furniture that had lived a dozen lives before landing here. Noah's eyes were wide with wonder as he moved carefully through the narrow aisles, his small hands hovering over objects with a reverence that made Liam's heart ache with a fierce love. Mr. Henderson, a kindly man with a cloud of white hair and glasses perched on the end of his nose, greeted them with a warm smile. "Liam, my boy, good to see you, and young Noah here to pick up your prize." Liam clapped him on the shoulder. "Wouldn't miss it. You sure you don't want anything for it?" Mr. Henderson waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense! That old thing has been collecting dust in the back for years. Better it goes to someone who appreciates its craftsmanship. You'll give it a good home." He led them to the back of the shop, where a small grandfather clock stood draped in a white sheet, its face clouded with age, but its bones still strong. Liam ran a hand over the dark wood, feeling the faint carvings beneath his fingertips. It was beautiful, a work of art, from a time when people built things to last. But as he and Mr. Henderson began to discuss the best way to load it into the truck, Noah wandered off, drawn by the delicate tinkling of a music box on a nearby shelf. It was small, made of dark polished wood with intricate silver inlays. A tiny ballerina poised on top, frozen mid-twirl. He reached for it, his fingers tracing the delicate lines, captivated by its fragile beauty, and then, in the way that accidents always happen, a moment of pure innocent curiosity turned into a sharp heart-stopping crack. The music box slipped from his grasp, hitting the concrete floor with a sound that seemed to shatter the quiet reverence of the entire shop. The ballerina's arm snapped off, landing a few feet away, a tiny broken limb of porcelain. Noah froze his face, draining of all color, his eyes wide with a terror that went straight to Liam's core. He didn't cry, he just stood there trembling, a silent monument to a mistake he couldn't take back. Liam was by his side in an instant, his own heart pounding in his chest. He knelt down, pulling his son into his arms, ignoring the sharp intake of breath from Mr. Henderson. "It's okay, Noah," he whispered, his voice steady, despite the tremor in his hands. "It's okay, it was an accident." But it wasn't okay. He knew the moment he saw the look on Mr. Henderson's face. A flicker of dismay, he tried to hide behind a practiced calm. That music box wasn't just any old trinket. It was special. It was priceless from across the shop. A woman who had been standing quietly in the shadows, her face obscured by a tall bookshelf, stepped forward. She moved with a quiet grace, her expression unreadable, but her eyes missed nothing. She had seen the whole thing unfold, the boy's innocent wonder, the father's fierce protectiveness, the shop owner's quiet despair, and the sound of something beautiful breaking on the cold, hard floor. The silence in the shop was thick enough to choke on, broken only by Noah's ragged little breaths as he buried his face in his father's jacket. Liam held him tight, his mind racing, trying to calculate the damage, trying to figure out how he could possibly make this right. He knew that look on Mr. Henderson's face. It wasn't anger. It was a quiet, resigned sorrow, the kind you get when something irreplaceable is lost. He looked down at the broken pieces on the floor, the tiny porcelain arm lying separate from the ballerina's body, like a fallen petal. It was a clean break, something he could probably fix. But that wasn't the point. He had taught his son that actions have consequences, that honesty was the only currency that truly mattered. He gently eased Noah back and stood to face Mr. Henderson, his own face pale, but his voice firm. "I'm so sorry." He said the words. "Feeling small and inadequate, we'll pay for it whatever it costs. Just tell me the number." Mr. Henderson sighed, running a hand through his white hair. "Liam, it's not about the money. That box was a one-of-a-kind piece from the 1890s, a commissioned gift for a French diplomat's daughter. It's not something you can just replace." Liam's stomach dropped, a cold dread seeping into his bones. He had imagined a few $100s, a sum that would have been a struggle, but manageable, but irreplaceable. That was a debt he couldn't pay. He glanced at the woman who had stepped out from the shadows. She was watching them not with pity, but with a quiet intensity. Her posture was poised, her clothes simple but well-made, a dark wool coat and a pair of worn leather boots that suggested she was no stranger to walking on uneven ground. She hadn't said a word, but her presence was a silent witness to the entire scene. Noah tugged on Liam's sleeve, his voice a small whisper. "I didn't mean to, Daddy." Liam squeezed his hand. "I know, buddy, I know." He turned back to Mr. Henderson, his pride warring with his panic. "I'll make it right," he said, his voice raw. "I can pay in installments. I'll work off the debt, whatever it takes. I don't run from my responsibilities or my son's." The woman took a half step forward, her eyes still fixed on Liam. She saw the desperation he was trying so hard to hide, the fierce dignity of a man willing to shoulder an impossible burden for the sake of his child. She saw the way he stood between his son and the world, a human shield made of love and integrity, and in that moment something inside her that had been dormant for a very long time began to stir. She recognized that look, that quiet determination, because she had seen it once before in a mirror years ago, before the money and the power had built walls around her heart. She knew what it felt like to be willing to lose everything for the one thing that mattered most. The woman finally spoke, her voice calm and even, cutting through the tension in the room like a steady hand. How much was it valued at? Her question was directed at Mr. Henderson, but her eyes never left Liam's face. The shop owner blinked, surprised by her interjection. Well, it's hard to say exactly with antiques like these, but the last appraisal was somewhere in the neighborhood of $20,000. Liam felt the air leave his lungs. The number hung in the air, a weight so immense it was almost physical. $20,000, it might as well have been $1 million. It was more than he made in half a year, more than the value of his truck and all his tools combined. It was a figure that represented not just a debt, but a hole he could never climb out of. He could feel the blood drain from his face, but he kept his shoulders straight, his expression carefully neutral for Noah's sake. He wouldn't crumble, not here, not in front of his son. He opened his mouth to speak, to say something, anything that would convey his intention to honor the debt, even if it took him a lifetime. But the woman spoke again before he could. "That seems a bit steep," she said, her tone measured. She walked over to the broken music box and knelt down, picking up the tiny porcelain arm with a delicate touch. She examined the break, her gaze sharp and analytical. "The mechanism is intact. The damage is isolated to the figure. It's a difficult repair, but not an impossible one." She looked up at Mr. Henderson, her eyes now holding a hint of something he hadn't seen before. "Authority, you and I both know the sentimental value is high, but the material cost of that repair is nowhere near that figure." Mr. Henderson shifted uncomfortably, his face flushing slightly. "Well, yes, but the provenance, the history. The history doesn't change the fact that a clean break in porcelain can be mended." She stood and turned to Liam, her expression softening just enough to be noticeable. "My name is Elena. I'm a specialist in antique restoration. I've been consulting with Mr. Henderson." She held out the tiny porcelain arm to Liam. "I can fix this for you free of charge." Liam stared at her, then at the broken piece in her hand, his mind struggling to process her offer. "Why would you do that?" he asked, his voice laced with a suspicion he couldn't hide. Elena's gaze flickered to Noah, who was watching her with wide, hopeful eyes. "Because," she said quietly, "I believe in second chances, and because I haven't seen that kind of honor in a very long time." She wasn't just talking about the music box. Liam didn't know what to say. He stood there frozen, a whirlwind of relief and confusion, and a deep-seated distrust of kindness that came without a price tag. He was a man who fixed things for a living. He understood transactions. He understood the exchange of labor for payment. But this was something else entirely. He looked from Elena's calm, steady face to Mr. Henderson, who was now nodding in agreement, then down to Noah, whose small hand was still clutching his own. Noah's eyes were shining with a desperate hope, a child's unshakable faith that the world could be mended, that grown-ups could make things right. Liam couldn't let him down. He took a slow breath, the air feeling less heavy in his lungs than it had just moments before. "I can't let you do it for free," he said, his voice firm with the last remnants of his pride. "I'll pay for your time, for the materials, whatever it costs." Elena didn't argue. She just gave a small nod, as if she had expected that response. "All right," she said, "let's call it $100 for the specialized adhesive, and my time, $100. Liam could manage that. It would mean a lean week, a little less in the gas tank, but it was a price he could pay with dignity. It was a lifeline, and he grabbed it with both hands. "Thank you." He said the words feeling inadequate, but it was all he had. Elena simply replied, "You're welcome now. Let's get this little dancer back on her feet." She carefully wrapped the broken pieces in a soft cloth and handed them to Liam, along with a small card that had only her name and a phone number, no address, no company logo, just Elena, printed in simple, clean script as they walked out of the shop with the old clock loaded in the back of the truck and the broken music box nestled safely in a box on the front seat. Noah looked up at his dad, his face a mixture of awe and relief. "She's like a magic lady, isn't she?" Liam looked down at the simple card in his hand and then back at the warm glow of the antique shop's windows. "I don't know what she is, kiddo," he murmured, "but she's something all right." He couldn't shake the feeling that his world had just tilted on its axis, and he wasn't sure if it was for better or for worse. Back in the quiet sanctuary of his workshop, the grandfather clock stood in the corner, a silent sentinel of a time long past. Liam ran a hand over its weathered surface, feeling the history in the wood, the nicks and scratches that told a story of 100 years of life. He would restore it, he would bring back its shine, make its heart tick again. It was what he did. He made broken things whole. But the music box was different. It sat on his workbench, the pieces laid out on a soft cloth, like a patient in an operating room. He stared at Elena's card for a long time, his thumb tracing the elegant script. Her offer had been a kindness, a reprieve, but it had also been a mystery. Who was she? Why would a specialist in antique restoration be hiding out in a dusty corner of a small-town shop? Her clothes had been simple, but the quality was undeniable. Her boots were worn, but they were the kind of leather that cost more than his entire wardrobe. Her confidence wasn't arrogance, it was an innate authority. A quiet power that she wore as comfortably as her coat. He'd spent his life around people who worked with their hands, people whose worth was measured in sweat and skill. Elena was different. She was something he couldn't quite place, and that unnerved him. Noah came into the workshop a few hours later, a half-eaten apple in his hand. He walked over to the workbench and peered at the broken ballerina. "Is the magic lady going to fix her?" he asked. Liam nodded. "That's the plan." "Is she your friend?" Liam hesitated. "I don't know, Noah. We just met." But as he said the words, he knew it was more complicated than that. He had seen something in her eyes, a flicker of recognition, a shared understanding of what it meant to protect something precious. He couldn't explain it, but he felt a connection to this stranger, a pull he couldn't ignore. He picked up the phone and dialed the number on the card, his heart pounding with a nervous energy he hadn't felt in years. She answered on the second ring, her voice as calm and steady as it had been in the shop. "Hello? It's Liam," he said, his own voice sounding rougher than he'd like. "The guy from the antique shop with the clumsy kid." He heard a soft chuckle on the other end of the line. "I remember. I was just calling to ask where I should bring the music box," he said, getting straight to the point. There was a pause, and then she gave him an address, a small cottage on the outskirts of town by the old Mill Creek, a place he knew well, a place that had been empty for years. "I'll be there tomorrow," he said. "Thank you again for this." "It's my pleasure, Liam," she replied. "I'm looking forward to it," as he hung up the phone. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into something much bigger than a simple repair. He was stepping into Elena's world, and he had no idea what he would find there. The next morning, Liam drove down the winding country road that led to the old Mill Creek. The autumn leaves crunched under his tires, a symphony of red and gold. The air was crisp and clean, and the world felt quiet and still. It was a stark contrast to the storm of emotions brewing in his chest. He found the cottage easily tucked away behind a stand of ancient oak trees. It was small and unassuming, with a stone chimney and a wide front porch that looked out over the creek. Smoke curled from the chimney, a thin white ribbon against the bright blue sky. It looked like a place from a storybook, a place to escape the world, not to work in it. He parked the truck and walked to the front door, the music box held carefully in his hands. He knocked, and the door swung open. Almost immediately, Elena stood there wearing a simple gray sweater and jeans. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she had a smudge of what looked like paint on her cheek. She looked different here, softer, more at ease. "Hi," she said, a genuine smile touching her lips. "Come on in." The inside of the cottage was just as surprising as the outside. It was warm and cozy with a fire crackling in the hearth, and shelves overflowing with books. The air smelled of wood smoke and turpentine, and something vaguely like cinnamon. But what caught Liam's eye was the workshop that took up the entire back half of the room. It was a restorer's dream. Tools of every shape and size were neatly arranged on the walls. Magnifying lamps stood poised over a large workbench, and canvases in various states of repair leaned against the walls. This wasn't a hobby. This was a passion, a profession, a life's work. "Wow," was all he could manage. Elena chuckled. "It's a bit of a mess, but it's my sanctuary." She took the music box from him and carried it over to her workbench. Placing it gently under one of the lamps, she switched on the light and peered at the broken pieces through a magnifying glass. Her focus absolute and unwavering. Liam stood awkwardly by the door, not sure what to do with himself. "Can I get you some coffee?" she asked without looking up. "I just made a fresh pot." "Sure, that would be great," he said, grateful for the distraction. As she moved to the small kitchen, he took the opportunity to look around more closely. On a small table by the window sat a framed photograph, a man and a woman standing on a yacht, the city skyline behind them. They were laughing, their arms around each other, the picture of wealth and happiness. But there was a stiffness to their smiles, a polished perfection that felt more like a performance than a genuine moment. He noticed a small detail. The woman in the photo was wearing the same style of watch Elena had been wearing in the shop, a discreet but undeniably expensive timepiece. It was another piece of the puzzle, another hint that the woman making coffee in a rustic cottage was not who she seemed to be. Elena returned with 2 steaming mugs and handed one to him. Their fingers brushed for a fleeting second, and he felt a jolt of warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee. "So," she said, turning her attention back to the music box, "let's see what we're working with." She worked with a focused intensity that Liam deeply respected. Her hands moved with a surgeon's precision, applying a tiny amount of adhesive with the tip of a needle. Then, carefully aligning the broken pieces of the ballerina's arm, she used a set of delicate clamps to hold it in place. Her brow furrowed in concentration. "This will need to set for a few hours," she said, finally looking up at him, "but it should be as good as new." Liam watched her, his admiration growing with every passing moment. He was a craftsman himself. He understood the patience and skill it took to do what she was doing. He also understood that her time was valuable, far more valuable than the $100 he had offered to pay. "You're really good at this," he said, his voice full of genuine awe. She smiled, a rare, unguarded smile that lit up her face. "I've had a lot of practice. My father was a collector. He taught me to appreciate the beauty in things that others might see as broken." Her smile faded slightly as she spoke, a shadow passing over her eyes. Liam sensed a deeper story there, a story of a father and a daughter, and a world of beautiful, broken things. But he didn't press, he just nodded, understanding that some stories were not meant to be shared with strangers. They worked in a comfortable silence for the next hour, Elena meticulously cleaning and polishing the rest of the music box while Liam sat by the fire sipping his coffee and watching her. He felt a strange sense of peace in this small cottage, a feeling of belonging that he hadn't felt since his wife was alive. It was a dangerous feeling, a feeling that made him want to lower his guard, to trust this enigmatic woman who had so unexpectedly entered his life. As the sun began to set, casting long golden shadows across the workshop, Elena finally leaned back from her work, a look of satisfaction on her face. "There," she said, her voice soft. "She's whole again." Liam walked over to the workbench and looked down at the music box. The ballerina stood tall and proud, her arm perfectly mended, the break almost invisible to the naked eye. It was a masterpiece of restoration, a testament to Elena's skill and dedication. "It's perfect," he said, his voice filled with a gratitude that went far beyond the repair of a broken object. "Thank you." Elena met his gaze, her eyes searching his for something he couldn't name. "It was my pleasure," she said truly, as he prepared to leave the cottage and return to his own world of sawdust and debt. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was leaving a part of himself behind. He had come here to fix a problem, but he had found something else entirely. Something that was both beautiful and terrifying, something that he knew would change him forever. Liam drove home under a sky bruised with the colors of sunset, the restored music box sitting safely on the passenger seat beside him. The air in his truck smelled faintly of cinnamon and turpentine, a scent that now felt inextricably linked to Elena and the strange sense of peace he'd found in her cottage. He glanced at the music box, its polished wood gleaming in the fading light. It was more than just a repaired object. It was a symbol of something he hadn't dared to hope for a second chance, a moment of grace in a life that had been defined by loss and struggle. When he got back to the workshop, Noah was waiting for him, his face a mixture of anxiety and excitement. "Did she fix it?" he asked, his voice a hopeful whisper. Liam smiled and carefully lifted the music box from its box. He wound the small key on the bottom, and a delicate melody filled the quiet space, a tune that was both melancholic and sweet. The tiny ballerina began to twirl, her mended arm moving in perfect harmony with the music. Noah's eyes widened with a look of pure magic. He reached out a hesitant finger and gently touched the ballerina's dress. "She's dancing again," he whispered. Liam knelt beside him, his arm around his son's shoulders. "Yeah, she is," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name, that night after Noah was asleep. Liam sat at his kitchen table, the music box in front of him. He opened the small drawer at its base and found a folded piece of paper tucked inside. It was a note from Elena, her handwriting, elegant and precise. "I believe everything deserves a chance to be whole again." He read the words over and over again, feeling their weight and their truth. He knew she wasn't just talking about the music box, she was talking about him, about them, about the broken pieces of their lives. He thought about the photograph on her table, the wealthy couple on the yacht, the polished smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. He thought about her expensive watch and her worn-out boots, the contradictions that made her so intriguing and so dangerous. He was a simple man, a carpenter, with calloused hands and a mountain of debt. She was a woman of mystery, a woman who could mend priceless antiques with a steady hand and an even steadier gaze. They were from two different worlds, and yet he felt a connection to her that he couldn't deny. It was a foolish thought, a dangerous one, but he couldn't shake it. He wanted to see her again. He wanted to know the story behind her sad eyes and her generous heart. He wanted to understand the woman who had brought a little bit of magic back into his life. The next few days passed in a blur of work and worry. Liam threw himself into restoring the grandfather clock, pouring all his energy into the familiar comfort of sanding and staining and polishing. It was a way to keep his hands busy and his mind from wandering to the woman in the cottage by the creek. But she was always there, in the back of his mind, a quiet presence, a lingering question. He hadn't seen or heard from her since he'd picked up the music box, and a part of him was relieved. The other part was consumed with a restless curiosity. He found himself driving past the antique shop more often than necessary, glancing at the windows, hoping for a glimpse of her. He even considered calling her on the pretext of checking on the repair, but his pride held him back. He wouldn't be a charity case, a project for a wealthy woman to fix and then discard. One rainy afternoon, as he was putting the finishing touches on the clock, a sleek black car pulled up in front of his workshop. It was the kind of car you only saw in movies, expensive and imposing and completely out of place in his dusty corner of the world. The driver's side door opened, and Elena stepped out, holding a large umbrella over her head. She was dressed in a tailored black coat and high-heeled boots, A stark contrast to the casual clothes she had worn at her cottage, she looked like the woman from the photograph, powerful, confident, and completely in control. Liam's heart did a strange little flip-flop in his chest. He wiped his hands on his jeans and walked to the door, his mind racing with 100 different questions. "Elena?" he said, his voice sounding more surprised than he would have liked. "What are you doing here?" She smiled a polite professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I was in the neighborhood, and I remembered you were working on Mr. Henderson's clock. I wanted to see how it was coming along." It was a weak excuse, and they both knew it. She could have called, she could have sent a message, but she had come in person, dressed like a woman who was used to getting what she wanted. Liam stepped aside and let her in. The scent of her perfume, a subtle, expensive fragrance, filled the small space. She walked over to the clock. Her heels clicking on the concrete floor, she ran a hand over the polished wood, her expression unreadable. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice soft. "You do incredible work." "It's what I do," he replied, his tone a little defensive. He felt a sudden need to assert his own worth, his own skill, in the face of her obvious wealth and power. They stood in an awkward silence for a moment, the only sound the drumming of the rain on the workshop roof. Then Elena turned to him, her eyes serious. "Liam, I came here for a reason," she said. "I have a proposition for you." Liam's guard went up immediately. "A proposition? What kind of proposition?" "I'm overseeing the restoration of a historic hotel downtown," she explained. "It's a massive project, and I need a master carpenter, someone with your skill and your eye for detail. The pay is excellent, and it would be a long-term contract." It was the opportunity of a lifetime, a way out of the debt that was threatening to swallow him whole. It was everything he had been hoping for, and yet he hesitated. He looked at Elena, her face a mask of professional calm, her eyes revealing nothing. He saw the power she wielded. The world she came from, a world of contracts and propositions, a world where everything had a price tag. "Why me?" he asked, his voice low. "There are dozens of carpenters in this town, probably better and cheaper than me." Elena's mask slipped for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something vulnerable in her eyes. "Because," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "I trust you." The words hung in the air between them, a fragile bridge between their two worlds. Liam knew that if he said yes, he would be stepping onto that bridge, and he had no idea where it would lead, but he also knew that he couldn't say no. He was a man on the edge of a cliff, and Elena had just thrown him a rope. He had no choice but to grab on and hold on tight. The decision to accept Elena's offer felt like jumping off a cliff without knowing if there was water below. Liam was a man who thrived on certainty, on the tangible reality of wood and tools and the predictable laws of physics, but Elena was a whirlwind of contradictions, a force of nature he couldn't predict or control, and he found himself drawn to her in a way that both thrilled and terrified him. He started work at the hotel the following week. It was a grand old building, a relic of a bygone era of glamour and opulence. The lobby was a cavernous space with marble floors, soaring ceilings, and a sweeping staircase that looked like something out of a fairy tale. The restoration project was massive, a symphony of construction workers, electricians, and artisans, all working in a controlled chaos that Liam found surprisingly familiar. He was given his own corner of the vast space, a makeshift workshop where he could focus on the intricate woodwork that needed to be restored to custom. Moldings, the hand-carved doors, the ornate window frames. It was the kind of work he loved, the kind that required patience and precision, and a deep respect for the history of the wood. Elena was there every day, a constant presence on the bustling job site. She moved through the chaos with a calm authority, her eyes missing nothing. She commanded respect without raising her voice. Her instructions were clear, her expectations high, and she had an uncanny ability to see the potential in things that others had written off as lost causes. Liam watched her from a distance, admiring her intelligence, her passion, her unwavering dedication to the project. He saw the way she inspired the crew, the way she treated everyone. With a quiet respect from the lead architect to the youngest apprentice, and he found himself falling for her a little more each day. They fell into an easy rhythm, their interactions professional, but laced with an undercurrent of something more. She would stop by his workshop to check on his progress. Her questions sharp and insightful, her appreciation for his work genuine. He would show her the details of a repaired carving, the way he had matched the grain of a new piece of wood to the old. And he would see a flicker of something in her eyes, a shared understanding, a mutual respect that went beyond their professional roles. One afternoon, as he was working on a particularly intricate piece of molding, Elena came and sat on a nearby sawhorse. Watching him in silence, the noise of the construction site faded into the background, and for a moment it was just the two of them in their own quiet world. "You love this, don't you?" she said, her voice soft. He didn't look up from his work, but a small smile touched his lips. "Yeah, I do. It's like giving something a second life." "I know what you mean," she said, her voice filled with a quiet wistfulness that caught him off guard. He looked up at her then and saw a sadness in her eyes that he hadn't seen before, a loneliness that her wealth and power couldn't hide. "What about you?" he asked, his voice gentle. "What do you love?" She looked away, her gaze drifting to the far end of the lobby, where a team of workers was carefully restoring a massive mural. "I used to love painting," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "but I haven't picked up a brush in years." The confession hung in the air between them, a fragile admission of a dream that had been lost or abandoned. Liam didn't know what to say. He didn't know the story behind her lost passion, but he knew that he wanted to. He wanted to know everything about this beautiful broken woman who had so unexpectedly stumbled into his life. He wanted to be the one to help her find her way back to the things she loved. He wanted to give her a second chance, just as she had given him one. As the weeks turned into a month, Liam and Elena's connection deepened beyond the confines of the bustling construction site. Their professional relationship began to bleed into their personal lives, a slow and steady current that pulled them closer together. It started with small things, a shared cup of coffee in the morning, a quick lunch at a nearby diner, a lingering conversation at the end of a long day. They talked about everything and nothing, about the history of the hotel, the challenges of the restoration, about Noah's latest school project, and Liam's struggles to keep his own workshop afloat. But they never talked about the one thing that hung in the air between them: Elena's past, her family, her wealth, the world she had so clearly left behind. Liam was patient. He didn't push. He understood that trust was a fragile thing, a seed that needed time and space to grow. He was content to wait, to let her reveal herself to him in her own time. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at the hotel, Elena invited Liam and Noah to her cottage. For dinner, Liam hesitated at first, worried about blurring the lines between their professional and personal lives, but the hopeful look on Noah's face was impossible to resist. The cottage was just as he remembered it, warm and inviting a sanctuary from the outside world. The air was filled with the scent of roasting chicken and freshly baked bread, and a fire crackled merrily in the hearth. Noah was immediately at home, exploring the workshop and chattering away to Elena about his day. She listened with a genuine interest that made Liam's heart ache with a strange mixture of jealousy and gratitude. After dinner, as Noah sat by the fire, engrossed in a book he had found on the shelf, Liam and Elena sat on the porch watching the stars come out. The night was clear and cold, and the sky was a blanket of glittering diamonds. They sat in a comfortable silence for a long time, the only sound the chirping of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. "It's beautiful out here," Liam said, his voice soft, so quiet. "It's why I came here," Elena said, her voice barely a whisper, "to find some quiet, to remember what it feels like to just be." Liam looked at her, then her face bathed in the soft glow of the porch light. She looked so vulnerable, so different from the powerful, confident woman he saw at the hotel. He felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to protect her, to shield her from whatever ghosts she was running from. "You can tell me you know," he said, his voice gentle. "Whatever it is you're running from, you don't have to run alone." Elena looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I know," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "That's what scares me." She didn't elaborate, but Liam understood she was afraid to trust, afraid to let him in, afraid of being hurt again. He didn't have the words to reassure her, to promise her that he would be different. But he knew in that moment that he would do everything in his power to prove it to her. He would be her sanctuary, her quiet place, her second chance, just as she had been his. The confession came on a cool autumn evening when the air was sharp with the promise of winter. They were sitting on the porch of Elena's cottage, a blanket wrapped around their shoulders, sharing a bottle of wine, and watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. The day had been long and exhausting. A series of unexpected setbacks at the hotel had left them both drained and on edge. But here in the quiet solitude of the cottage, the stress of the day seemed to melt away, replaced by a comfortable intimacy that had become their new normal. "I haven't been completely honest with you, Liam," Elena said, her voice low, her eyes fixed on the swirling liquid in her glass. Liam's heart gave a slight lurch, but he kept his voice calm. "I know?" Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with surprise. "You know? I saw the photograph in your cottage the day I brought the music box," he admitted. "And your watch? It's not exactly something you pick up at a flea market." Elena looked down at her hands, a faint blush creeping up her neck. "I should have told you." "Why didn't you?" he asked, his voice gentle, not accusatory. She took a deep breath, the story tumbling out of her in a rush of words, a torrent of long-suppressed emotions. She told him about her family, the Vance dynasty, a name synonymous with wealth and power and a cold, transactional approach to life. She told him about her father, a brilliant but ruthless man who had built an empire on the ashes of his competitors. She told him about her childhood, a gilded cage of privilege and loneliness, a world where love was a commodity and affection was a strategic move. She told him about the pressure to be the perfect daughter, the perfect heiress, the perfect public face of a company she had grown to despise, and she told him about the man she had loved, the one she had trusted, the one who had used her to orchestrate a corporate takeover that had nearly destroyed her family and her heart. "I ran away," she concluded, her voice barely a whisper. "I left it all behind, the money, the power, the name. I just wanted to be invisible for a while, to find a place where I could be just Elena, not Elena. Vance." Liam listened in silence. His heart aching for the pain and betrayal she had endured, he reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers in a gesture of comfort and support. "You're not invisible to me," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. "You're the most real person I've ever met." Elena looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "But I lied to you, Liam. I deceived you. You protected yourself," he corrected gently, "and I don't blame you for that." He squeezed her hand, his thumb stroking the back of her palm. "Your past doesn't define you, Elena. Your heart does, and you have the most beautiful heart I've ever known." Tears streamed down her face. Then, not tears of sadness, but of relief, of release, of the overwhelming joy of being seen and accepted for who she was, not for what she had. Liam pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as she sobbed against his chest. He didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. His actions spoke louder than words, his presence, a silent promise that she was safe, that she was home, that she would never have to run alone again. The revelation of Elena's past changed everything, and nothing between them. The mystery was gone, but the connection remained stronger and more profound than before. They were no longer two strangers from different worlds, but two souls who had found a common ground in their shared experiences of loss and resilience. Their love story unfolded slowly and naturally, a quiet symphony of small moments and unspoken understandings. They spent their days working side by side at the hotel, their shared passion for restoration, a tangible expression of their growing bond. In the evenings, they would retreat to the cottage or Liam's small apartment, finding solace and comfort in each other's company. Noah adored Elena. He saw her not as a billionaire heiress, but as the woman who made his father laugh again, the woman who taught him how to paint, and who always had time for a story or a game of checkers. He had seamlessly woven her into the fabric of their small family, a bright thread of color in a life that had once been muted by grief. One sunny Saturday afternoon, as they were working in Liam's workshop, Noah looked up from his drawing and asked a question that had been hovering in the air for weeks. "Are you going to marry my dad?" Elena, who was helping Liam sand a piece of reclaimed wood, froze her cheeks, flushing a brilliant shade of red. Liam chuckled, a low, warm sound that filled the small space. "Well, that's a bit forward, don't you think, kiddo?" Noah shrugged, his expression serious. "I just think you make him happy." Elena looked at Liam, her heart in her eyes. He met her gaze, his own eyes soft with an emotion that took her breath away. "He's right, you know," he said, his voice low and steady. "You do make me happy, happier than I ever thought I'd be again." He took her hand, his thumb tracing the faint scar on her palm. "I love you, Elena Vance, not for your money or your name, but for your kind and generous heart, for your strength and your vulnerability, for the way you see the beauty in broken things." Tears welled in Elena's eyes as she listened to his words, a declaration of love that was more precious than any diamond or jewel. "I love you too, Liam Morgan," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "More than you'll ever know." Noah beamed, his mission accomplished. He went back to his drawing, a triumphant smile on his face, as Liam pulled Elena into a long overdue kiss, a kiss that sealed their love and their future, a kiss that promised a lifetime of second chances and happily ever afters. The old hotel stood as a testament to their love and their shared vision, its grand halls and ornate rooms restored to their former glory, a perfect blend of history and modernity. It had become a symbol of their journey, a place where two broken souls had found a way to build something beautiful and lasting together. But their true masterpiece was not the hotel. It was the life they had built together, a life of quiet joy, simple pleasures, and a love that was as solid and enduring as the ancient oaks that surrounded their cottage. They were married on a warm spring day in the garden of the cottage, surrounded by a small group of friends and family. Noah was the best man, his chest puffed out with pride as he handed his father the simple gold band that would seal their union. Elena wore a simple white dress, her hair adorned with wildflowers, her face glowing with a happiness that was so pure and radiant it took Liam's breath away. They exchanged vows. They had written themselves promises of love and loyalty, of a shared future built on a foundation of trust and respect. They were not the flowery words of a fairy tale romance, but the honest, heartfelt words of two people who had weathered their own storms and found a safe harbor in each other's arms. After the ceremony, they celebrated with a simple backyard barbecue, a far cry from the lavish parties of Elena's past, but infinitely more meaningful. The air was filled with the sound of laughter and music, and the joyful shouts of Noah and his friends as they played in the yard. Liam watched his wife, his son, his family, and felt a sense of contentment so profound it brought tears to his eyes. He had come so close to losing everything, and now he had it all. He had a thriving business, a beautiful home, and a family that was a testament to the power of love and second chances. Later that evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset behind the trees, Elena snuggled close to him, her head on his shoulder. "Are you happy?" she asked, her voice a soft murmur. He kissed the top of her head, his heart overflowing with a love that was almost painful in its intensity. "More than you can imagine," he said. "You gave me back my life, Elena." She looked up at him, her eyes shining with love and gratitude. "And you gave me a reason to live it," she said. They sat in a comfortable silence for a long time, their hands intertwined, their hearts beating as one, the future stretched out before them, a blank canvas waiting to be filled with the colors of their love, their dreams, their shared journey, and they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together hand in hand, heart to heart. Two broken souls made whole by the transformative power of a love that was as real and as beautiful as the art they created together years later. An old grandfather clock would stand in the hallway of their home, its steady ticking, a constant reminder of the day their lives had changed forever. And a small music box would sit on their mantel, its tiny ballerina twirling to a sweet, melancholic tune, a symbol of their love story, a story of a broken man, a lost woman, and the transformative power of a second chance. A story that proved that sometimes the most beautiful things are the ones that have been mended, the ones that have been given a new life, a new purpose, a new chance to dance. The winter had settled over the small town like a quiet blanket of white, muffling the world in a soft hush. Liam's workshop was a haven of warmth and light, the scent of sawdust and fresh coffee, a welcome respite from the biting cold outside. He was hunched over his workbench, carefully carving a small wooden bird, a gift for Noah's upcoming birthday. His hands moved with the practiced ease of a master craftsman, his focus absolute and unwavering, but his mind was elsewhere, lost in the memories of the past year, a year that had transformed his life in ways he could have never imagined. He thought of the day he had walked into the antique shop, a desperate man with a broken son and a mountain of debt. He thought of the beautiful, mysterious woman who had offered him a lifeline, a second chance, a glimmer of hope in the darkness, and he thought of the love that had blossomed between them, a love that had healed their broken hearts and woven their two disparate worlds into a beautiful tapestry of shared dreams and a common future. A small hand on his arm brought him back to the present. Noah stood beside him, his eyes shining with a curiosity that was so uniquely his. "What are you making, Dad?" he asked, his voice a soft whisper. "It's a surprise," Liam said, winking at his son. "But I think you're going to like it." Just then the workshop door opened, and Elena stepped inside. Her cheeks flushed from the cold, her eyes sparkling with a love that still took Liam's breath away. She was carrying a small box tied with a red ribbon, and a mischievous smile played on her lips. "I have a surprise for you, too," she said. Her voice filled with a playful excitement. Liam raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "What is it?" he asked. She placed the box on his workbench and carefully untied the ribbon inside. Nestled in a bed of soft white cotton was a small silver key. "What's this for?" he asked, his voice filled with confusion. Elena's smile widened. "It's the key to our new home," she said, her voice ringing with a joy that filled the small workshop with a warmth that had nothing to do with the wood stove. Liam stared at her, his mind struggling to comprehend her words. "Our new home," he repeated, his voice a stunned whisper. "But we have a home. We have a cottage and an apartment," she corrected gently, "but I thought it was time we had a place that was truly ours, a place where we could build a future together, a place where we could be a family." She pulled out a set of blueprints from her coat pocket and unrolled them on the workbench. They depicted a beautiful, sprawling house with a large workshop for Liam, a painting studio for her, and a big backyard with a treehouse for Noah. It was a dream home, a home that was a perfect reflection of their shared passions and their love for each other. Liam looked at the blueprints, then at Elena, his heart overflowing with a love and gratitude that was almost overwhelming. "I don't know what to say," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Say yes," she said, her eyes shining with hope and love. "Say you'll build this life with me. Liam, say you'll be my partner, my love, my family forever." Liam didn't hesitate. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her with all the passion and love that had been building inside him for the past year. A kiss that was a promise, a commitment, a celebration of the beautiful, improbable love that had brought them together and made them whole again. Their new home was built on a plot of land overlooking the creek, a stone's throw from the cottage where their love story had begun. It was a labor of love, a project they had undertaken together, every nail, every board, every brushstroke, a testament to their shared vision and their unwavering commitment to each other. Liam's workshop was a masterpiece, a craftsman's dream come true, with soaring ceilings, natural light, and every tool a man could ever want. Elena's studio was a sanctuary of creativity, a space filled with canvases and paints and the vibrant colors of her imagination. And Noah's treehouse was a magical kingdom in the sky, a place where he could dream and play and be a kid for as long as he wanted. Their life was a beautiful symphony of love and laughter and the quiet joy of a family that had found its way back to each other. They were a testament to the power of second chances, a reminder that even the most broken things can be mended, that even the most disparate worlds can be woven together into a beautiful and enduring tapestry of love, and that sometimes the greatest treasures are not the ones we find in antique shops, but the ones we find in the hearts of those we love. The grandfather clock that had brought them together now stood in the entryway of their new home, its steady ticking, a constant reminder of the preciousness of time and the beauty of a love that had been given a second chance to bloom, and every now and then on a quiet evening, Liam would wind the small key of the music box and he and Elena would dance to its sweet, melancholic tune, a dance of love and gratitude, a dance of two souls who had found their way home in each other's arms. The first snow of the season was falling in thick, fat flakes, dusting the world in a pristine coat of white. Liam stood at the window of their new home, a mug of hot coffee warming his hands, watching as Elena and Noah built a snowman in the backyard. Their laughter echoed through the quiet winter air, a joyful melody that filled his heart with a warmth that defied the cold. Outside, he smiled to himself, a deep sense of contentment settling over him like a comfortable old blanket. He had everything he had ever wanted, a home, a family, a love that was as real and as solid as the ground beneath his feet. He thought back to the man he had been a year ago, a man drowning in debt and despair, a man who had forgotten how to hope. He thought of the desperate prayer he had whispered into the darkness, a plea for a second chance, a way out of the hole he had dug for himself. And he marveled at the way his prayer had been answered in the most unexpected and beautiful way imaginable. He had been given more than a second chance. He had been given a new life, a new beginning, a love that was a gift from a universe he had long since stopped believing in. Elena came in from the cold, her cheeks rosy, her eyes sparkling with joy. She wrapped her arms around him from behind and rested her chin on his shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her voice a soft murmur. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am," he said. Turning to face her, he kissed her gently, a kiss that was filled with all the love and gratitude that he couldn't put into words. "You saved me, Elena," he said, his voice thick with emotion. She smiled, her eyes shining with tears. "We saved each other," she said. They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, the snow falling softly outside the fire, crackling in the hearth. The world a perfect picture of peace and love and happily ever after. And in the distance the grandfather clock chimed the hour, its steady rhythm, a comforting reminder that their love story was just beginning and that they had a lifetime of beautiful moments to look forward to. Together, they were a family, a team, a force of nature, a testament to the fact that love could conquer all, that it could heal all wounds, that it could bridge any divide, and that it could turn even the most broken of lives into a masterpiece of beauty and joy. The legacy of their love would live on for generations to come. A story whispered from parent to child, a tale of a humble carpenter, a lost heiress, and a love that was as timeless and as enduring as the ancient clock that had brought them together. It was a story of hope and redemption, a story that proved that no matter how dark the night, the sun will always rise again, and that love in its purest and most selfless form is the greatest treasure of all. The story of Liam and Elena was more than just a love story. It was a modern-day fairy tale, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome adversity and find happiness in the most unexpected of places. It was a story that would be told and retold for years to come, a source of inspiration and hope for all who heard it. It began with a broken music box and a chance encounter in a dusty antique shop, but it evolved into a beautiful tapestry of love, trust, and second chances. Liam, the humble carpenter with a heart of gold and a mountain of debt, had found his salvation in Elena, the billionaire heiress who had lost her way in a world of wealth and power. Together, they had healed each other's broken hearts and built a life that was richer and more meaningful than anything they could have ever imagined. Their love story was a reminder that true wealth is not measured in dollars and cents, but in the currency of love and kindness, and that the most valuable things in life are not the ones we own, but the ones we share, their home. A beautiful, sprawling house built on a foundation of love and respect was a sanctuary for their small family, a place where they could be themselves, where they could dream and create and grow together. Liam's workshop was a testament to his passion for his craft, a place where he could turn broken things into objects of beauty and value. Elena's studio was a vibrant explosion of color and creativity, a space where she could rediscover her lost passion for painting and express the joy and love that had filled her heart. And Noah's treehouse was a magical kingdom in the sky, a place where his imagination could run wild, a symbol of the carefree childhood that his parents had worked so hard to give him. Their story was a beacon of hope in a world that was often cynical and jaded. A reminder that love could still conquer all, that it could bridge any divide, that it could heal any wound, and that it could transform even the most broken of lives into a masterpiece of beauty and joy. And so their love story would live on, a timeless tale of a carpenter, a princess, and a love that was as enduring as the stars in the sky, a love that had been forged in the crucible of adversity and had emerged stronger and more beautiful than ever before. It was a love that would inspire generations to come, a legacy of hope and redemption, a testament to the transformative power of a second chance. The sun was setting on another perfect day, casting long golden shadows across the valley. Liam, Elena, and Noah were gathered on the porch of their home, a comfortable silence settling over them as they watched the sky turn from blue to orange to a deep and velvety purple. Noah was nestled between them, his head on his mother's lap, his eyes heavy with sleep. Liam reached out and took Elena's hand, his thumb stroking the back of her palm in a familiar gesture of love and affection. "I love this time of day," she said, her voice a soft murmur. "It feels like the world is holding its breath." "I know what you mean," he said, his voice filled with a deep contentment. "It's a time for reflection, a time to be grateful for all that we have." He looked at his wife, his son, his beautiful home, and his heart swelled with a gratitude that was almost overwhelming. He had come so far from the desperate man he had been just a few short years ago, a man on the brink of losing everything he held dear, and now he had it all, a thriving business, a loving family, and a peace of mind that was more valuable than any amount of money. Elena squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with love. "You know what I'm most grateful for?" she asked, her voice filled with a quiet emotion. "What's that?" He asked, his voice a gentle whisper. "I'm grateful for that broken music box," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "It was the best mistake your son ever made." Liam chuckled, a low, warm sound that echoed through the quiet evening air. "I guess some mistakes are meant to be made," he said. He pulled her closer, his arm wrapping around her shoulders in a protective embrace. They sat there for a long time, watching the stars come out one by one, a blanket of glittering diamonds in the vast and endless sky. They were two people from two different worlds who had found a common ground in their shared love for each other and for the beautiful life they had built together. Their story was a testament to the fact that love knows no boundaries, no class, no divide. It is a force of nature, a powerful and transformative energy that can heal all wounds and make all things new. And as the moon rose high in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the sleeping world, Liam and Elena knew that their love story was far from over. It was a story that was still being written, a story that would continue to unfold with each passing day, each shared moment, each new chapter of their beautiful and improbable life together, and they wouldn't have it any other way. The morning sun streamed through the large windows of the workshop, illuminating the floating dust particles like tiny fairies dancing in the air. Liam was at his workbench putting the finishing touches on a small wooden sailboat. Its sails were made from a piece of old canvas, and its hull was carved from a single piece of reclaimed oak. It was a simple object, but it was made with a love and attention to detail that was evident in every curve and every line. Noah burst into the workshop, his face flushed with excitement, his eyes shining with a joy that was infectious. "Dad, look what Elena made me," he said, holding up a small painting. It was a beautiful watercolor of the sailboat. Liam was working on its sails, billowing in the wind as it sailed across a sea of brilliant blue. "It's amazing, kiddo," Liam said, his voice filled with a genuine admiration for his wife's talent. "She's a pretty special lady, isn't she?" Noah nodded enthusiastically. "She's the best," he said, "and she said she's going to teach me how to paint so I can make my own masterpieces." Liam smiled, his heart swelling with a love for his small family that was almost painful in its intensity. He had never imagined a life this full, this rich, this beautiful. He had been so lost for so long, and now he had found his way home. Elena came into the workshop then, a smudge of blue paint on her nose and a smile on her face that could light up the darkest of rooms. "I see you've seen my latest work," she said, her voice filled with a playful pride. Liam walked over to her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice a low murmur against her hair. "Just like you." She laughed, a sound that was like music to his ears. "You're just saying that because you're my husband." "No," he said, his voice serious. "I'm saying it because it's true." He kissed her then, a long, slow kiss that was filled with all the love and passion that had been building between them since the day they met. It was a kiss that spoke of a shared past, a beautiful present, and a future that was as bright and as limitless as the sky above. They were a family, a team, a force of nature, a testament to the fact that love could conquer all, that it could heal all wounds, that it could bridge any divide, and that it could turn even the most broken of lives into a masterpiece of beauty and joy. Their love story was a legacy, a gift to the world, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, there is always light, and there is always the transformative power of a love that is pure, selfless, and true. The story of Liam, the humble carpenter, and Elena, the lost heiress, would be told and retold for generations to come, a timeless tale of love, redemption, and the enduring power of the human spirit to find its way home. It was a story that proved that fairy tales do come true, that dreams can be realized, and that love in its most beautiful and powerful form is the greatest masterpiece of all.